I'm meteorologist Katie Nicolau, and you're listening to the Coffee and Geography podcast. Grab yourself a brew and enjoy the listen.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Coffee and Geography podcast. And yes, if you are silly enough to watch the video rather than just listen to the recording, I am wearing my onesie because it is quite late at night here. But my guest is 8 hours behind me because they're located in Victoria, British Columbia. And I'm gonna have a go at this, and you're gonna correct me. So, Niiyokamigaabaw Deondre Smiles.
You got it right on the
Hello
first
to you.
try. Yeah, hello.
Oh, hello. Good afternoon to you.
Yeah, good evening to you, Kit. Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be on here with you. And for my part, I would love to be wearing pajamas or a onesie right now, but it's
I think
as a
you've given me
teaching day
permission
for
to put
me.
my hood up.
That is
Oh,
great.
great. I already feel that you're a very safe person, so that's great. I might it might get a bit too warm after a while though, so you might go back down. Okay, so to introduce Deondre. So Deondre is an Ojibwe geographer who does research on Indigenous geographies, particularly the ways in which Indigenous communities take meaningful actions to protect their environments and more than human kin in an era of anthropogenic environmental change. I got your name right, and I can't say a word that I say all the time that's anthropogenic. That's just typical of me.
It's a tough word.
Deondre is originally from Minneapolis, which is something we share in common because my partner's from the Twin Cities, but currently live with his spouse in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, with our cat, 5 spiders, 4 tarantulas, and one jumping spider. Don't let that one get out. Several fish and many isopods. Oh, we're definitely going to have a chat about that later. He has a doctoral degree in geography from the Ohio State University and a master's degree in global Indigenous studies from the University of Minnesota, Duluth. Wow. This whole episode can just go straight on to about your jumping spider if we're not careful.
My wife would love that. Would be very happy about that. They are the spider enthusiasts. I have come to really like the spiders as well. And no, the none of the spiders leave their enclosures because no, we don't want them getting out. That's not safe for them. But yeah.
Okay, so you've come to love them. Gotcha. Right. Okay. So kudos on your partner on that one. Right. So we're sitting in the virtual Coffee and Geography coffee house, Deondre. So if we were to be doing this in real life and we were having a nice face-to-face chat, what's usually the kind of beverage that you turn to over a chat with a friend or a colleague?
That is a great question. And I feel a little self-conscious being on a podcast called Coffee and Geography because I'm not a really big coffee drinker myself.
It's okay, I'm a tea drinker.
I do enjoy tea. It's getting a little bit late in the day, and so I'm actually trying to follow the rule now where you're supposed to stop drinking caffeine within 10 hours of going to sleep, because in that way the caffeine will leave your system. But I'm cheating a little bit. I have let's see if I can show it here. I have cherry Coke Zero, part of my lunch, so that's what I'm drinking today.
Cherry Coke, yep. I used that, and okay, product placement, folks, but who cares? That and Dr. Pepper, I used to drink copiously when I was a child. When I used to drink it like water, and you know what? Actually, it was probably the best thing that I did that, because I got so sick of it at an early age. So sick of it. I could actually feel my teeth rotting and everything. And I think I was about 15, 16 when I was just like, I'm not doing this anymore, because I used to drink it so much. So yeah, I can't drink the stuff anymore. So but yeah, I've got that memory imprint of what the cherry Coke used to taste like. And do I miss it? Maybe. Yeah, okay, fine. Yeah, I'm as I say, it's 9:10 at night here, so I'm just on the water now. I'm being good. Yeah, so you have, Deondre, a very such an intriguing spatial identity, I feel, because I was just reading your profile and what you've said here. So you on your website, you say your Black and Swedish heritage, as well as, of course, you're Indigenous as well, and you've moved all these places. Well, you know, you've you come from Minnesota. Now you're in, and I'm just thinking, what kind of, and the question I always ask people, Deondre, is kind of like, in terms of your geographical identity, kind of like, how is your identity, Dr. Deondre today, how has that been shaped by the places that you've lived and experienced?
That's a really great question, and I think that's actually at the heart of how I define geography and define it as a field as well as an experience. And so one of the things that I oftentimes teach my students when I'm teaching about geography or talk about when I'm having conversations with folks around the field is the belief that we are shaped by the different places that we move through and that we spend time within. And so one of the things is obviously being a Minnesotan. I still have a little bit of an accent, although it's beginning to go away. And have a bit of a tolerance to the cold. When I go back home, I can deal with the snow and the sub-zero temperatures, have a liking for hockey and casseroles, or we call it hot dish in Minnesota.
Hot dish.
All these various things. But then when I moved out to Ohio, there were components of being in Ohio that I really got into, such as cheering for Ohio State football, or getting a liking for different types of food and different restaurants, different cultural activities that were out there. And then when I moved to Canada 5 years ago, I have subtly begun to take on more traits of the geographies around me. And so I'm thinking about, for example, now my wife and I both own hiking boots and own rain pants and good rain jackets for being outside here in the rain that oftentimes falls in Victoria during the winter. We've really gotten into hiking, gotten into car camping, going out and spending time out in nature. Also just the little cultural things about being Canadian have started to grow on us, like using the word washroom instead of restroom, or instead of saying Z, saying Z, or things like that. I think even somebody the other day caught me saying pasta instead of pasta, and they're like, "Oh,
no.
You really are becoming Canadian." And it's like, "Oh, yes." But I think that we carry with us all these different places, and it helps shape us into who we are today. And so when people ask me, what's the best place you've ever lived? I'm like, well, I think every place I've lived has been the best place I've lived, because it's helped shape me into who I am today.
Yeah. It's funny you was mentioning the accent. It's like my partner, my wife, I don't think she's still got the accent, but it's so interesting because when she goes back and visits friends and family back home, they could say, "Oh, you're sounding quite British now. You're sounding quite British." And yet, when she's over here, she's like, "Oh, you're definitely American. You're definitely American." And she still says "root" and "crick" and stuff like that, And she, but yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you with regards to like every place you touch. Geography, I think, is such a core part of anybody's identity. So I think I've visited Minnesota and the Twin Cities a lot, and I've, seen the pitted outwash plains. I've gone to the shores of the Great Lake. I've been up to Itasca and places like that, and spent a lot of time on the banks of the Mississippi, because that's where my father-in-law lives now. Is like Highland Park on St. Paul side of the river, right down by the Mississippi River. And yes, the cold. You're so right about the cold. So a quick anecdotal story for you, John. You'll love this as a Minnesotan, right? So
Right.
we were out in the United States for a year after I'd finished high school teaching, and we invited my mum and dad over from the UK for Christmas and for New Year's, because Christmas, and also my youngest was born in early July, so it was his first birthday. So my mum's like, "Okay, so what should we bring over, Kit?" And we was like, "Clothes, lots of layers, lots of clothes, lots of layers. You're going to be cold." And I don't think it really hit my parents until the cold literally hit my parents the minute that those doors opened at Minneapolis St. Paul into the car park or the parking lot. And my dad gave an expletive, put it that way, because it was so cold. And he took a couple of breaths and his glasses were fogged up. And he said, "I've never experienced anything like that at all." I said, "Yes, it was minus 25 degrees Fahrenheit."
It is really difficult for folks that are not used to it to experience it for the first time. It's just it is a different kind of cold. We have cold temperatures here in Victoria, not to that extent, but usually it'll get around 0 degrees Celsius.
Yep.
In folks of you, that is really, really cold. But here we also have the moisture coming off of the ocean, and so it's a very wet cold. Whereas in
Yeah.
Minneapolis, it's a very dry
Very
cold,
dry
and
cold. Yeah.
so I think it's I almost prefer the dry cold because a good jacket, you can kind of block out the wind and block out that cold. Here, the cold almost seems to seep through your jacket, and so first I would laugh when people were bundling up and wearing like heavy coats, and in December I'm like it's 1 degree outside, or about 33, 34 Fahrenheit. It's not that
Yeah.
cold. And then now I feel like maybe we've just acclimated enough, or we're just kind of realizing, oh hey, it actually gets rather chilly here. But
Yeah.
when I do go back home, usually nowadays I'll fly into Winnipeg and then cross the border and drive south into Minnesota, and it takes me about a few hours to kind of get myself reacclimated to the cold, and then I'm fine. But it does take a
Yeah.
little bit of adjustment from like, oh yes, this is what it feels like to be well below zero, and have your rental car barely starting up because it's too cold for the battery.
Yeah. And do not park it on a street which is due to be ploughed, because that car is
Nope.
not going anywhere. Yeah, and I tell
Nope.
it's a shame. It's a shame that my partner's upstairs. She's getting ready for bed now. She would bond with you so easily now, because she says exactly the same thing. You know what's really interesting? She said, "I can stand minus 25 degrees back home, but I can't stand 0 degrees here in the UK, because it's that wet cold that just sticks to you and it seems to sink in everywhere." Probably does the same in Victoria, I guess, with the same similar kind of climate. But she says, but minus 25 in Minnesota, I can handle that easy. It's like,
Hmm.
so it's not just as we, us climate change folks as well, folks. It's not just the heat, it's the humidity as well. It's how wet the air is as well, both in terms of coldness and heat. That really kind of does make a difference. So, and the other thing you've got in parallel actually with my partner is that she went to Oberlin College in Ohio for her degree. So again, that those parts kind of thing. But in terms of my identity, I think the big part is moving away from home and going to university in a place called Norwich in United Kingdom. That was very formative for me, but also spending time out in San Francisco, because I think that's when I really, really found my identity was finding those queer spaces in San Francisco. And that really kind of, well, it kind of opened my eyes to a whole new world of my own entire identity, really. So I completely understand and get that geography is such a big part of that. So we've got to let's stick with the geography then. So Ojibwe then, geographically for folks, I mean, I can grab maps and stuff like that, but geographically, if you were to describe kind of like where your ancestry from the Ojibwe kind of was, whereabouts in North America was that? So I mean, I can kind of picture it roughly where it was. I mean, was therefore Minnesota like a natural starting place for you? Is that kind of part of that area which was traditionally a Ojibwe?
Right, that's a great question. Actually, the funny thing is we talk about the Great Lakes being our homeland, but it actually isn't historically. The Ojibwe peoples have originally came from what's today like Quebec and Nova Scotia and New Brunswick out on the east coast of Canada. We started a migration westward, I'd say probably around 1000 AD or so. The oral history, the legend goes that some of our medicine men, some of our leaders, our spiritual leaders, received a vision and a prophecy of migrating to a place where the saying was where food grows on water. And so they looked around and they said, well, okay, well, this is not where food is growing on water, so let's go ahead and let's start moving westward. Is per the prophecy. And so if people take a look at a map and they see kind of the St. Lawrence River there in Quebec and follow that all the way down through the Great Lakes, through Lake Ontario, Lake Erie, Lake Huron, Lake Michigan, and then Lake Superior, that's actually a really easy way of tracing our journey. And so through the early part of I guess it'd be the second millennium, 1000 to about 1500, we moved down through the Great Lakes and eventually reached a point at the far western tip of Lake Superior where they saw a crop called wild rice, which grows in water. And they said, okay, this is the place where food grows on water. This is our new home. And so we kind of spread out from there. And so kind of our presence nowadays is actually a really kind of shows where we've been. And so there's Ojibwe folks in Quebec, in Ontario, as well as in Michigan, in northern Wisconsin, Minnesota, and actually further westward up to the point of northern North Dakota, southern Manitoba. And there's even some Ojibwe communities that have reached as far as Saskatchewan. And so we're pretty widespread geographically, but yeah, so Minnesota, I consider it my home. That's our homelands now, but we kind of recognize where we have come from initially.
Yeah, so there's a really interesting tool that I've tried to encourage geographers here in the United Kingdom to use. Is when they're talking about geography in terms of a place-based study or something like that. One thing we did this teacher training where we're talking about how we could decolonize the sense of place and the fact that this is all Western colonial borders and things like that. And there's one tool that I came across called, I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called NativeLand.ca. And what's really interesting, let me just switch to that, because when I go to NativeLand.ca, so if people who are looking on watching this on YouTube can see. So you've got all these different. So this is by language here, and so you've got the Western. So how do you pronounce that? Anishinaabe.
Oh, Anishinaabe.
Anishinaabe. So you've got Western, but that seems to be obviously that's far west from what you were describing, almost towards towards the latter part of the journey, I would say. And then if I go. Because it lists three. So if I share this tab, so it lists three. So you've got Western, and you've got Eastern, and then you've got Southern. But none of those kind of maps actually they kind of like only pick up bits and pieces of your description. So like this one here is, you can see, that bit coming down the, Strait of St. Lawrence into this area. And then I think the other one was a big patch around the Great Lakes, as you were saying, Minnesota and Wisconsin, which is that one there. So yeah, so this map kind of like does a good-ish job of kind of showing these kind of patches of area, but it clearly, even as a whole, they don't tell the entire story. And I guess that's one of the limitations of trying to map anything, really, isn't it? I mean, maps always have a purpose. There's always a narrative that comes with maps. And even though from people, if you can see on the screen, you can see that all these different kind of cultures, heritages, languages, they all overlap. And there was a lot of intersection going on there. Even this is a great attempt and just an eye opener, but it's still inadequate to the kind of story and the journey that you've just described.
Yeah, it's just actually a really good, kind of the intervention point to talk through sort of an Indigenous framing of geography. It's that geography, as we've learned it kind of in the Western world, in the Anglo-speaking world, is, is really centered around kind of that desire to create hard boundaries and to be able to definitively outline, this is whose territory this is what country this is. And there's not a lot of porosity or flexibility in those boundaries. But if you take a look at, NativeLand.ca is a really great tool. And when I use this to teach my students, that they oftentimes get kind of a little, what's the word I would look for here? They get a little startled by, the different overlapping territories, and they're not used to kind of that overlapping, nature of different relationships to land. And I say, well, yes, different Indigenous peoples can have relationships with different land at different times. As a matter of fact, here in Canada, with the treaty system, this was something where people, when the British Crown was trying to negotiate treaties with Indigenous peoples, they ran into difficulties when trying to outline the boundaries between different numbered treaties, because Indigenous peoples would say, well, you're trying to draw a boundary down the middle of this mountain range, but we've had relationships on both sides of the mountain range. Like we might be living on one side and then we'll go to the other side. And so, yeah, I think that, in particular, this tool is great to, really unsettle the dominant ways of understanding geography, and more towards a sense of understanding, the deep interconnectedness, between different communities and in a given place at a given time, that it's not that land tenure and that our own personal geographies are not mutually exclusive, but rather more mutually inclusive.
Yeah. Actually, I'm gonna ask something kind of sort of personal at this stage right now. I mean, I'm wondering whether, I mean, when I started to go through that, I mean, okay, context very, very quickly. So I'm from originally a conservative background with a small C. I used to grow up with a British flag in my house and all this kind of stuff. And it wasn't until I went to university and I started to branch out and see different parts of the world and go traveling and go to places like South Africa and Malawi, that I realized how it connected with me, as in it just didn't feel right. This kind of like nationalism kind of approach and stuff like that. So I guess that's why naturally I've kind of gravitated towards communities like decolonising geography and stuff like that. So the question I'm really getting to, Deondre, is when, for example, Brexit happened in 2016, I didn't just feel that was like a material loss, like, oh, I've lost my European citizenship, I can't travel to freely, whatever. I felt a massive, it was very destructive and quite, I felt sorrow I felt like I'd lost a part of my identity. That I felt so connected. I didn't feel like British and English because this is the boundary of seafaring and all this kind of stuff. I just felt it was so natural to be able to move and talk to people and engage with people, embrace their culture, learn from them, and that freedom of kind of cultural exchange. That was just so natural to me, and I just felt that it was like almost a hit to my personal identity, kind of something like Brexit. I mean, I don't worry, I'm not asking you to be my therapist or anything like that, but I wonder if you've got any insights, like kind of like where has that come from? Like, I had such a strong colonial Western upbringing, massive white privilege, and before I came out as trans, cisgender, heterosexual privilege and everything like that. But I had this innate feeling. I mean, where on earth did that come from?
Yeah, I think that when we are confronted with events, whether they're geographically based, as Brexit was, right, or socio-political events that are themselves also geographical, when there are things that kind of shake us to our core and really uncover, things about our fellow citizens, or our community members that we didn't notice before. I think it can be something that's almost it's almost like a gut punch in a way. I think, with Brexit, in particular, right, kind of this idea of the United Kingdom kind of forsaking trade relationships and political integration, that just about 2 generations before that they had fought really hard to get. Right. So as a bit of an amateur European historian and geographer, I'm very familiar with the multiple attempts of the UK to try to join the European Economic Communities, and then de Gaulle blocking them, and then finally joining in 73, and then 43 years later, or
Yeah.
50 years later, they're leaving. And it began to lay bare kind of from friends that I have in the UK, particularly folks in Wales and Scotland. It began to kind of lead to an upswelling of kind of that identity of like, are we really British, or should we be leaning back into our Scottishness or our Welshness, right? And so, yeah, I mean, it's you can see similar things in the United States and Canada. I mean, given the geopolitical situation we're in now, I will say it's very difficult for me to think of myself as an American. I'm almost leaning more into my Canadianness, because it's like, well, we're seeing all kinds of proto-fascist stuff in the streets, and how can folks that are living on stolen land complain about immigration when they came here, right? When they displaced Indigenous people. Similar thing to Brexit, how the kind of this idea of a former imperial power constantly putting up barriers to prevent the other from coming and immigrating. A big reason why Britain established different forms of citizenship back in the 60s and the 70s to prevent members of the Commonwealth from immigrating, and by members of the Commonwealth, folks from like the recently free, independent African colonies in India and other places being able to immigrate and claim British citizenship. We're seeing kind of similar dynamics, and even to bring back the UK example, this the trends with like Reform UK and kind of this idea of like, well, England, Britain for the British people. Well, who are the British people, right?
Yes.
What does that mean?
Yes, it's such a misnomer. It really is, and it's what the ironic thing as well. I mean, a lot of the vast majority of people who listen to this, Deondre, are educators, like teachers, educators here in the UK. And one of the things that we have to teach, or we have to kind of demonstrate in schools, is British values. And you can look them up, folks. If you're not in the UK and you're not a teacher, just look up British values and teaching British values in school, right? But if you look at those British values, what's really interesting, and I did contribute to a book chapter on this about teaching citizenship, and they're really not British. They're global values. It's all about respect for people's identities and all this kind of stuff. And yet, it's just the way that kind of stuff gets manipulated by some kind of the powers that you've mentioned. So yeah, and of course this is all and you were going back to kind of the Commonwealth. It's all stemmed from the fact, bringing it all back to full circle, what you said about drawing lines on a map. Oh, a river makes a nice boundary, or that watershed line on the mountain, that makes a lovely boundary. But hang on a minute, there is absolutely no consideration and nothing, there is just complete, as you say, it's based on stolen land with complete ignorance and greed for what's on the land, and that's, and I think one of the reasons why there's so much pushback on kind of this, and people saying, oh, you're so woke or something like this, is because I think there is some internalized guilt and shame going on that people are in kind of denial, and they're internalizing that, so they then kind of express it as in, oh, you're woke, all this kind of stuff, and go really overdrive with the national pride and stuff like that. I mean, again, you're not a therapist and I'm not a psychologist, but that's the kind of sometimes the way it comes across, I think. I want to let's bring it back to I've got a fantastic question here. I think Akira, my wonderful friend Akira Williams, on the Decolonising Geography Collective, has got a fantastic query for you, Deondre. So let's talk about this. And if I don't talk about it, she will never forgive me. So she says, I would love to hear more about Indigenous methods of governance based around the stars in the Ojibwe tradition. Because she said she read an article that you wrote about this or something like that. And she said she'd love to hear more about methods of governance based around the stars. It sounds poetic, just in the question, really.
It is, and it's a great question. That's been an area that I've really been leaning into more, is the kind of the indigenous geographies of outer space, like how we think about outer space, how we think about the stars and extraterrestrial space, and what that can tell us about how to build sustainable relationships to land here on Earth. And so the stars in Ojibwe oral traditions and stories, and there are folks that can tell these stories way better than I can, and so apologies to anybody who's listening who's Ojibwe and listening to me probably make a butcher these stories, but the stars hold a lot of knowledge. The stars are the place where our ancestors, where kind of our great spirits live. The stars are actually where humanity came from. The story goes that we were brought down from the star world onto the planets, onto the world after it was created for us, or I guess created in spite of us by our more than human kin, the animals and spirits, and the water and the wind and trees. And so the stars, particularly the constellations, there's Ojibwe constellations that we have where there might be there's stars that maybe are shaped like the bear, right, or shaped like the fish, or we have names for many of the kind of celestial bodies out there in the cosmos. And for us, we talk about these sorts of things as being indicators of kind of our clan system. Our governance system is very heavily based, our traditional governance systems are heavily based on clan systems, and there's still obviously in the present day we have more probably closer to hybrids between Indigenous and European styles of governance, but we still very heavily rely on the clan system as a way of identifying ourselves and introducing ourselves. And so there's different stories associated with the different clans and the different constellations, and there's usually some kind of important lesson to be told from all of them. And the exact stories are kind of escaping my brain at the very moment, right? But one of the things that when we talk about kind of the beginning of the world, we say, well, once upon a time, everything that was here on Earth started with the stars themselves. That our clans were made out of stars. You know, just like the cycles of the Earth, right? That's the representations of our clans and the different roles that we play in society were also represented in the stars. And so when people talk about for example, there's one, constellation that we know is Orion that we call in our language, like they go in a canoe, right? And it represents people traveling together, right? Or, another constellation, that maps onto like the crane as a clan animal, right? Or the bear is a clan animal, or the fish or the beaver is a clan animal. And so we really look to the stars as kind of an inspiration, as kind of who we are as Ojibwe people, and a reminder that that there's more to that, more than just us in this world, right? Not just here on the earth, but rather kind of above. And so if we're trying to live in a good way, we call it Mino Bima Dizi Win, which is living in a good way. We have to take into account all parts of the world, not just this world, but other worlds beyond.
That's just so beautiful. I mean, I remember looking up at the stars without light pollution for the very first time in Wales, actually rural Wales, and I was just so captivated by it. And then that's what kind of led my love to almost, I wanted to kind of pursue astrophysics, but I wasn't smart enough for that, so I ended up doing environmental science. But I've always been fascinated by the stories here, and I came across this website just before we came on, kind of Zawan Art, and does this star stories, different parts, and it's just the artwork is just, it's so beautiful, and I almost kind of like got lost and forgot about the time. So we've got different characters here. We've got shapes of people, shapes of animals, prints. We've got, I mean, I keep seeing the turtle, Deondre. And it seems to be very prominent in a lot of this artwork. Can you shed some light on that, especially the turtle here with the trees on its back?
Certainly happy to. So the turtle is a very important animal in our worldviews in Ojibwe, oral histories, because our world creation story, the creation of Turtle Island, couldn't have happened without the turtle itself. And so the story goes that the turtle gave the back of its shell as a sacrifice to build a new world on top of it. And so when we talk about the world, we'll call it Turtle Island, and that's actually something that gets used a lot across North America. But I'm always really cautious of saying, well, that's kind of a very localized, very place-based understanding of the world. That may not be the tradition out here on the West Coast, right, or in the American Southwest, or in the Arctic. But if you take a look, there's actually some really cool maps online that people can look, and if you see kind of North America, if you look at it from the right angle, maybe squint a little bit, it almost looks like the back of a snapping turtle, like the back of a turtle. And people think that might be where we got the idea of Turtle Island from.
I mean, this is projecting into Makaya, which I absolutely that's a bit better. Okay, so where are we looking here? So for people this is great for podcasting if you're listening audio, folks. So we've got a map of the United States.
Yeah, so if you were to take a look, for example, at the northern part of Canada, kind of the northern central part of Canada, kind of the grayish part of the map there, if you take a look, that almost looks like the head of a turtle, and then Alaska and Quebec would be kind of its front claws, and then you kind of go down and see as you kind of go down, you see kind of the outline of its shell, and then Baja California and Florida could be like its rear feet, its rear legs, and then Mexico being its tail, because snapping turtles have like giant alligator style tails. And so
got it. That is so cool. And yeah, and seeing images, pictures, formations in rocks, in the on the ground, from above. That's something that's tales old as time, isn't it? That is. I mean, there's a so where my partner's family have a house out in just outside of Bozeman, just behind the house in the mountains. There's this rock formation, and when they were kids, this my wife said when she was very little, her and her cousins, they looked at this rock face. They thought they saw the face of a gorilla, so they forevermore now call it Gorilla Mountain, even though it doesn't have it doesn't even. I don't think it even has a. Well, ignorant me. I'm pretty certain that far enough ago there would have probably been indigenous folks who saw that formation and would have named it in some way or given it, but we couldn't find any record of that. So, but yeah, you just see formations and faces and things in anything really, and that's just so fascinating. And that's where things like art can, really is such a great vehicle for this. So just going back to that website that I was showing earlier, I mean, I could spend for hours on this. This is just so beautiful. The way, I mean, that's just, yeah. So I'm gonna have to do that. Yeah, I need to be going to bed after this chat, Deondre, because I'm really kind of, yeah, I'm really. Well, thank you very much for answering that. So you mentioned about the stars, and is there kind of with regards to kind of like modern day popular culture and things like that, has your kind of the way that you see the stars, and we're made, and I love that whole concept of we're all made from stardust and stuff like that. Is there anything you feel like in modern day culture, popular culture, that you feel is a good representation of kind of this whole concept of us being part of the cosmos? I mean, for me, for example, Star Trek is the big one for me, for instance. But yeah, do you find yourself kind of like looking to these kind of like modern constructs and saying, well, that's actually quite a good way of showing it? Oh yeah, I can see what they're trying to do there. It's a kind of, I did phrase this question in my head a lot better than I'm verbalizing it.
Yeah, it makes me think as a bit of a sci-fi fan and kind of a budding Trekkie, I think about the Prime Directive actually as being a really good example of kind of this way of looking at non-interference with the cosmos and with different folks. That the Prime Directive, for folks that are not familiar, is the foundational, one of the foundational orders, standing rules for Starfleet, essentially saying that you are not to interfere with the development of alien cultures, that you are not to interfere with a culture that's developing, that you're not to, like the pin, it's an awesome pin. You are not to essentially try to influence the course of their development or their history. Which is oftentimes a big source of conflict in different works of within the Star Trek universe, including a few movies, right? Kind of the idea of like, well, is it right for us to unfairly influence the development of a culture, or to impose ourselves within them? And I find that from kind of an Anishinaabe point of view, it's kind of again the idea of like, well, we are the least important part of the ecosystem, from the kind of the big guiding lesson from the creation of Turtle Island, that story. And so if we are the least important part of the ecosystem, we need to take up the least amount of room, and we shouldn't be interfering in things that we have no business interfering in. So I think the Prime Directive is a really great example of that. As kind of an ideal, right? Is the idea of like, we have become civilized enough and advanced enough that we have gained some kind of ethical understanding of the power that we wield, and are committing ourselves to not wielding those in coercive or destructive ways. Now, of course, they break the Prime Directive all the time, right? And there's all kinds of conflicts around it, but it is that ideal, though. Even the fact in Star Trek, again, that the major interstellar agency for Earth, right, the Federation, the Starfleet, is, although there are military ranks and the ships are weaponized, it is above all a scientific fleet, right? It is supposed to be out there to collect knowledge and to learn more about the world and to expand our knowledge, and having a future Earth where we've moved past poverty and racism and it's a very idealized future. And I think back in 1966, when Star Trek first aired, right, this was viewed as like a huge, huge leap, that we were still in the time of segregation and, very violent race relations. And I think even in 2026, 60 years later, I think that, there's still a lot of aspirational goals with this, but I think it's something where, we at least kind of have a vision of what would it look like if we showed the world the best of humanity, right?
Yeah.
And so
100%. And yeah, 1966, that was the year that Star Trek went woke.
Right from the very beginning. Yep.
Right from the very beginning. Yeah. So folks, again, if you're not watching, I've got my Starfleet Academy badge here, because I have this really silly idea of doing geography videos in the guise of exogeography Starfleet lecturer. Oh, whether I ever get around to doing that. Yeah, and in fact, I don't want to spoil anything for you or anybody listening, Deondre, but the recent series Starfleet Academy, in fact, the most recent episode that was out, I won't spoil it, folks, but it focused on the Klingons and what happened to them in the 32nd century, and the whole episode is very Star Trek, because it's all about Klingon culture and respecting that culture, and something happens in the episode which the Federation want to respond to, but the whole episode is about how do we do this in a way that respects Klingon culture and doesn't interfere with their development the way they want to fit. And there's one line which I don't think is a spoiler, but one of the characters says the Federation stops becoming the Federation when they act in a way that means Klingons stop becoming Klingons, basically. And I just thought, and that kind of thing was just like, it blew my mind. I was like, yes, that's exactly what we're talking about, and that is such a mirror to what's going on today. And what's been happening in human history, for the past few thousand years with colonialism and neo-colonialism. Yeah, you might think you're doing a bit of good. It's like, yeah, we're going to bring you civilization, we're going to bring you technology, but yeah, are you doing that in the way that respects the culture? If those people want that in a way that they want that, because it will disrupt their rhythms, it will disturb the natural processes of things, and that's not actually very beneficial. Might be beneficial to you, but definitely not beneficial. So yeah, I mean, that's why I always love finding like Star Trek as a fantastic analogy for that, and the whole infinite diversity and infinite combinations kind of thing. And now we can go on forever and talk about Star Trek, but I can do that with my friend Sean Ferrick from Trek Culture, so I'll leave that to him. But this has been, I want to do one more thing before we start winding down, because I just love this. And you like moving through space, experience space, interact with space is a major part of our personal geographies. And you say here you love traveling and seeing new places. So what's kind of like the most profound or kind of memorable place that you've visited, as a guest? Well, if you could say, I would love to go back there. For me, it's somewhere like Malawi, I think.
Right. And so I have traveled internationally outside of North America. Once in my life, I went to Europe, and it was amazing going to Greece, and Turkey. I was on a study abroad trip. And I think that's, I immediately think about, getting to go back to Greece and getting to actually be a little bit, or Italy as well, and kind of being in these historical places that have such relevance for the Western world. But when I immediately think of like what's the one place that I was just blown away from when I first visited, is actually someplace here on the island. We were very lucky here on Vancouver Island to have a temperate rainforest kind of along the Pacific coast, and I got to go out and visit out there in preparation for a field school that we were offering at my university. And it was absolutely just breathtaking, just seeing these old ancient trees and getting to see the open Pacific Pacific Ocean in front of me. Like there's nothing between us and Russia or Japan here. And so that's one of my favorite places in the world, and I particularly love that because it's only about a 4-hour drive away from us, and so my wife and I go all the time. But it's a place that just is very spiritually nurturing for me. I realize I really love being around water, and so it's a place that I find myself going back to time and time again.
Oh, great. That's fantastic. And the fact that you are, well, by North American standards, it's just down the road. That's quite handy. 4 hours. Yeah, it's trust me, folks, here in the UK, 4 hours in that part of the world is not that far. 4 hours here would get you probably across to the Welsh border if you're lucky. Probably Birmingham, maybe. Manchester. I can get to Manchester in 4 hours. So, but there's one other thing I want you to spill the beans, because I don't want you to get away with this one, Deondre, right? Because you say here that you're a musician. You played the viola for 9 years and then became a drummer.
Yep.
Oh, come on! You've got a piano back there for people who are listening on the podcast. You've got a piano right there back here.
Right.
Come on, tell us a little bit about your musical talents.
Yeah. So no, happy to. So yep, I was a musician. My mom felt it really important for me to get into music as a way to further develop my brain and learn more. Learn really good skills. Musicians are usually research shows that folks that are involved in music are usually better at like mathematical skills and spatial skills and critical thinking skills. Which I guess I wasn't terrible at math. I didn't love math when I was in school, but yeah, I played the viola because the orchestra folks were the first people to get to us at an elementary school, and I played that for 8-9 years and realized I don't really love viola. I really actually liked playing the drums, and so I started playing percussion, and this was like 18 years ago. I started playing percussion, or I guess 19 years ago, almost 20 actually. It's been 20 years since I really started playing percussion, and I've really enjoyed it. It's there's a really nice, it's always like a different challenge when I play in a local concert band here in Victoria with my spouse, who's a bassoon player, and it's always a really nice challenge. I always feel like it's good. It's a nice way to work my brain out without having to be deep into academic literature. And it's just a lot of fun. That's how my wife and I met, was through band, and so we're very musical. Yep, you pointed out the electric piano in our back, the back of our office here, which we actually got for free. They essentially were like, as long as you can pick it up and move it out of our house, you can have it for free. So we have this piano, and we have a ton of musical instruments, and it's just really great. There's always a lot of music in our household, and so and there's a lot of geography that goes into music too, right? Around
seriously.
The embeddedness of place and space and how we think about music. So it all kind of comes full circle. But yes, love music, love listening to music, love playing music, love going to concerts. It's just a lot of fun.
Oh, that's so good. In fact, I strongly encourage you to. So I know that the viola. So I used to play the tenor saxophone. I've still got it, but I've not picked it up for years. So I think maybe the best way to describe it is the viola is to the tenor saxophone that the violin is probably to the alto saxophone. So the violin is slightly smaller than the viola. I think that's right.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. Just like the tenor saxophone is bigger than the alto saxophone, and the bassoon is such an interesting instrument. It's basically just a giant pole kind of version of. Think of a saxophone that you've just basically squished into a tube, folks. So yeah, that must be really. Yeah, have I ever heard a bassoon be played? I don't think I ever have. Believe it or not.
Should totally look it up. My wife she was a oboe player. She plays a ton of different instruments, but she started playing bassoon because our local band needed a bassoon player because we didn't have any, and she's fallen in love with it. She even bought a bassoon, and really enjoys it.
Yeah, the oboe was I thought the flute or the oboe, the clarinet, dabbled in the clarinet a bit, because when here in elementary school and primary school, it's like you start off with the recorder, and then if you're good at that, then maybe they'd offer you the clarinet. And so I did that for a little bit, and then when I got to secondary school, I was like, no, I want to play the saxophone, and then kind of like then. I've got to stop that. I've got to get back into that, Deondre. I keep shaming myself, and I've said it to so many guests now. I should get back to the saxophone. Okay, all right. Before I commit to anything, that's amazing. And also, I don't think this podcast has ever been used as a classified advert before. So there you go, if you want a piano, folks, you know who to get in contact. Right. Okay. So. The last thing for us to do then, Deondre, because it's been a wonderful discussion and it is getting late. So is to link you. And one of the things I love about this podcast is to try and link all the guests together, because I feel like we're one big geography community. And so we do this thing. We are all geographers, where we give ourselves a chain of words to connect together. So the last chat I had was with the wonderful Marvi, and she had a go at doing the word clay for 30 seconds, which was given to her by Dr. Robin Hayward, who is an expert in trees. So she was given the word clay by Robin, and then now Marvi would like you to have a go for 30 seconds of riffing about the word glass. Anything you would like about the word glass for 30 seconds. So whenever you're ready, Dr. Deondre, I'm going to start the timer and talk about the word glass for 30 seconds.
Sure thing. All right. So glass. Glass is a very, very, it's a beautiful material, right? It's something that can be very multifaceted, where it can be clear, it can be opaque, it can serve as a way of building up walls, it can serve as an opening, right? Sliding glass doors. Glass can be something that can be safe for us, safety glass, and it can also be something that can be quite dangerous if we use it in the wrong way, like breaking a glass and having to pick that up and look for shards of glass.
Oh, goodness, yeah.
I think that it can be something that maybe isn't, if you're very good at cleaning your windows, maybe birds might not like it. There we go.
Yeah, and I'll let you into. I'll give you a guess. I have 2 young children, right? Who was the last person to break a glass? It was actually a milk bottle in our household. Me.
That's it.
Not the kids, it was me. And yes, going around that, trying to get every little bit of shard, certainly can be a bit dangerous. Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you. So, Deondre, for our next guest, can you think of a word or something you'd like them to have a go at for 30 seconds?
Chili.
Chili, as in the chili, as in the temperature, or chili as in the vegetable?
As in the temperature. CHILLY. Yep.
Gotcha. Love that. Love that link back to our opening chat about minus 25 degrees Fahrenheit temperatures. Oh well, Deondre, this has been a really, really wonderful chat. Thank you so much for giving up your time, and I feel really, really privileged and honoured that you've done that, and for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge with us. And I want people listening to reach out and connect with you and learn, and kind of like, because I think the geography, the geography that you share and the insights you share is just so fascinating, and I'd like people to experience that as well. So where can people find you, either on social media, or I know you've got your own website, so I can put those links in the description.
Yeah, I would say probably the best way would be my website, and then I'm on Blue Sky as well, Niiyokamigaabaw.bluesky.social, and so they can see me kind of share more of my thoughts on geography and kind of the world at large.
That's fantastic. Please do that, folks. This has been such a great chat, and as I say, if it wasn't 10 o'clock at night, I'd stand by, and I don't want to take up too much more of your time anyway, but I really, really hope you stay in contact and we keep interacting on social media at the very, very least. And thank you so much for your time.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on, Kit. It's been an honor and a pleasure. And definitely we'll stay in touch.
And live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper. Yeah. All right.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Coffee and Geography. If you're enjoying the show, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app and leave us a rating or review. It really helps. Some episodes are also available with video, so don't forget to check out the Geogrambling's YouTube channel for more. Stay in the loop by following us and using #CoffeeJogPod on Blue Sky and LinkedIn. That's #CoffeeJogPod, where we share updates on new episodes and upcoming guests. Got a question for a guest? Post it on LinkedIn or Blue Sky using #JogQ over a brew. Yes, #JogQ over a brew. And we might just feature it on the show. Keep exploring, keep connecting, and as always, keep geogging.